Having a website not just helps you to popularize your brand, but also helps you to interact with your customers. Well, it's very easy to start a website nowadays, only if it's an informational website. But what if you want to start a business or an e-commerce website? Then things get a little tricky. That's when you need a plan. Before we move ahead, do click on the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get timely updates. Do stay tuned till the end of the video, where we'll help you understand whether spending more or less will bring a difference to your project. In this tutorial video, we are going to connect the dots right from the domain registration to the launch of your dream website. We will also be meeting our industry experts who will help you understand the various technologies that are being used, the various testing that happens at the back end of the website, and the time frame at each of those checkpoints. So let's get started. Let's start off by considering the types of websites. The first one would be website for information, and the second one would be website for business. In both the cases, WordPress.com would be an ideal choice you've got. WordPress.com is actually an online open source website creation platform, which is ideal not just for casual blogging, but also for e-commerce platforms as well. Website for information is mostly popular among bloggers. A blog is a place where you actually share your interests, places of visit, hobbies, etc. Now, when we speak of e-commerce websites, the online income is considered to be the source of income, and you are liable to pay the tax. And if you have to pay the tax, you need to be a registered entity. In other words, if you're doing a business, you need to be registered as a company or a firm. The easiest approach towards getting your firm registered is a sole proprietorship business. For people who have missed out our video on how to register your sole proprietorship firm, do check out the link in the description or the link on the left hand side. Let's dive into the different processes that you need to go through before you start your website. Starting with stage 1, understanding your business. Basis why, what, and how you sell helps you determine the scale and scope of your project. This also would help you to understand how formal or informal your website needs to be. And do remember, the colors being used on your website also are determined by the industry that you belong to. Finally, you take a decision on how your customers should actually access your website, whether it is through a mobile application or a website-based application or both. The next stage is SRS or sitemap. In other words, it's like a flowchart. Site mapping would basically help you understand the navigation within your website. A typical commerce website sitemap looks something like this. This section of the sitemap is considered to be the main heads of your website. These carry various subsections, which represents distinct functionalities. Your SRS or sitemap requirement can actually be outsourced to the website developers. They would typically send you a questionnaire in order to understand your product or service. The usual turnaround time for this to happen is 10 to 15 days. Remember, at this stage, you would be asking for a non-disclosure agreement, also known as an NDA. This NDA has to be signed before the website developers start working or coding on your website. And yes, do remember to read the terms and conditions very carefully. The next stage is designing and reviewing. At this stage, your website takes shape. The logo, description fields, images, videos are placed. These decisions are made keeping in mind the customer's persona. The website developer either shares a live link with you so that you can see the updates on daily basis, or you will receive the updates via email. If in case you're not satisfied with the designs, you can definitely make suggestions or changes using Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop. Only upon your approval will the website developers go to the next module. The turnaround time for the design process may vary depending on the project. A typical e-commerce website project will take up to a month time to get done. The next stage is website content. Now, in order to engage with your customers, your content on the website plays a very crucial role. The turnaround time at this stage is basically up to a month if in case your site is content driven. At this stage, you can either create the content on your own, or outsource it to the content writers to make it SEO friendly. Based on the sitemap, design and the content, now your website is ready for the final coding and backend testing. Let's hear from our experts about how they do it.
Right, so the technologies that we use for a mobile website and a desktop website is actually the same. There is no difference between them. We just make the codes in such a way that they are responsive in both the platforms. The very commonly used platforms, speaking of platforms, is for basic websites, WordPress is extremely popular. We also have Drupal and Joomla, which is extremely popular. And when we come to e-commerce websites, we have some big platforms like Magento, and then we have some little, less complex platforms like PrestaShop and WooCommerce, which is very commonly used. Now the turnaround time that it takes for a normal website, which is what we call content management system, a normal 5-page or 10-page website, when a person wants to show his information, is basically from a basic website is going to take a few weeks, let's say 3 weeks, from the designing to the development stage. When it becomes more complex like an e-commerce website, then it takes up to 1.5 months or maybe 2 months, depending upon the complexity of it. We plan the designing part, we plan the programming part, and of course there is a testing part as well, which is very important and critical to the project success.
So for a particular module, let's say like if the development has taken about like a month to complete a particular module, the testing would be somewhere around like a couple of weeks to complete. Okay, now out here, testing is not just the functional testing that we are doing out here. What we have to keep in mind is we have to do the security, the performance testing, the functional testing, as well as the load testing. Now there are different kinds of testing which goes in the back end, and for some certain modules, like for example for a customer's profile, if we are going to test a customer profile, then there is another kind of testing which comes into action, which comes into the picture, which is called database testing. So these are the different kind of testing techniques that we perform.
Speaking of the budget that you spend on getting a website ready, it's a natural tendency in order to choose the quotation that will make you spend the least. But it will be really wise in order to also evaluate what extra features or benefits you will be getting in return by spending a little more. In other words, you might get access to an experienced team, a dedicated resource, expert advice, post-domain launch support, to name a few. This will not be the case if you go for a cheaper alternative. So be wise and choose the right vendor. And as always, plan ahead to stay ahead. We are Nations Network from AtionZ, and we shall see you in the next tutorial.